Rest is the new resistance. Hello again, friends. It's me, Sarah, your host at What's on Your Plate podcast. I'm here today with Arria Deepwater, and we're talking about something that should be simple, yet has become very complicated. We've cluttered our lives with all the doing, becoming, conforming, hustling, modernizing, and consumerism, just to name a few things. We've forgotten how to just be. We've forgotten how to rest and to hold space for our authenticity. We have forgotten the many benefits that come from rest and why it's so necessary. This one really gets into some deep and intriguing thoughts. I'm excited to share it with you. Let's welcome Arria. This is just going to be a really fun conversation today, and I'm just really looking forward to it. I'm here today with Arria Deepwater, and she is here to talk about a lot. I feel like there's going to be a lot of depth to this conversation, but we were talking about how she embraced a radical rest protocol during and as the result of a long-term illness. She is reemerging and has come to understand that rest is a devotional path that opens us to meaning, healing, and our true wild nature. Author of the award-winning novella Descent, she's here today helping us explore healing between modern society and the natural world. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a wonderful, when you started by saying it's going to go deep, I wanted to, my last name's Deepwater for a reason. That's where we
Right.
go.
I don't think there's anything superficial about you, quite honestly, just based on our previous conversation and what I've come to learn about you through what you've shared with me and your beautiful book. It's just also wonderful, and it really just gets to a level that I feel like is necessary to talk out loud about.
I'm so happy to be here, Sarah. Thank you so much. I love this pod. I love what you do with it. I think we talked in our initial interview. I expressed how much I love that you don't want to focus just on the positive, that you're willing to
Hmm.
sort of embrace all of life for everything that it is. And that's such an important philosophy. So I'm so honored to be here. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. Absolutely, there are difficult conversations, things that are hard to hear in this space, but that's just part of life. Like we have talked about before, the need for grief within our lives is absolutely essential for the full human experience. And there's all different kinds of grief. It's not just about the loss of another human, right? So, but yeah, let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. We want our listeners to follow along the conversation here. So one thing that I really want to just dig deep into right off the bat is breaking up with the world. I really
Mm.
love how you have described that to me before, and I'd love to hear you talk about what that means for you.
All right. That is jumping right in, by the way. But yeah, all right, let's start. Yes, I was in taking a bit of a marketing branding workshop with one of my dear friends, Cindy Ashton, who's brilliant, by the way, if anyone wants to go. Cindy Ashton Curry, she's now using her full name. And she was talking about kind of creating a one sentence, as so many of these workshops do, this one sentence capturing of what our message is. And I was playing with this and playing with that. And it all of a sudden occurred to me that, you know, my own journey and what I really love to nurture and support other people through, whether it's private sessions or with my writing with fiction, it's really about going through sometimes a bad breakup with the modern world. That's really what it is. It's about realizing that, you know what, we're in a toxic, sometimes abusive relationship with modernity and the systems that are in place and how they ask us to hustle and sell ourselves and just buy and consume and become more and more inauthentic in order to succeed often. And then the models of success are, well, they just seem to perpetuate the systems themselves, even when they're deeply embedded in the best intentions. And especially coming from my own position in a body that was marginalized through illness and disability and being queer, those journeys do provide the what I call a deliciously fractured reality, in that we're able to look at the world a little differently and question, partly because we have to, in order to survive, in order to make sense of ourselves and feel whole. We have to remove ourselves from the system that we're being pushed out of, or at least not let into fully in the first place. So all of these things have just sort of allowed me to realize that, the modern world, modernity as it exists now, I don't want to be in that relationship. And then it's a question of breaking up. And I think we all know that the toxic relationships are often the hardest to break up from. They're the ones that keep us the most entangled, the ones that keep pulling us back, that we have a hard time cleansing ourselves from. So there's 1,000 millions different ways that we might each individually need to do that. But then I think there are patterns for really finding our authenticity and finding our own way and questioning our place in the system and being okay with that. Really, stepping into our wildness and the parts of us that might be deemed as a bit of a freak, and embracing that and finding wholeness in it, and hopefully holding space together between worlds, because we're not in the new world yet. And a lot of us are wanting to let go of the old one. And so we're here in between, going through that breakup.
It's just so beautiful the way you describe that. And in the background of everything you just said is your book. Like your book that I read, that everybody needs to, by the way, it releases this year. Is that right?
Yes, I don't
Officially?
have an exact date yet. We're hoping for late summer. It might be the
Okay.
autumn.
Okay. Well, either way, when it becomes available, Descent is absolutely something that everybody needs to read, and it's beautifully written, and it absolutely has the most enchanting character that everybody's just going to fall in love with. And everything you just described about the, we'll call it, I guess, the true or real world, or the reality
Mm,
of humaning, is absolutely evident in that book in a beautiful fiction way. Um, and I just want everybody to read the book, because it's absolutely gonna, tie in everything that you just said and the story that you've shared with Sona, and just the very different reality that she lives in, and how her body is different than most others, and finding her way through this world that she doesn't quite fit into, and then finding one that she does. It's
yeah.
just gorgeous.
Thank you. That's a warm fuzzies for me. I love it. Thank you so much. Sona is, they're all my favorite babies, really, when you get down to it. But I have a special place in my heart for Sona. And it's interesting because I love what you said, Sarah, about how it's the real world of humaning. And
Mm,
Sona isn't entirely human.
mm,
And that's not a spoiler alert, because it's evident in the first paragraph.
hmm
So she is in this body that literally doesn't belong. And yet she's found a way through into adulthood with a certain amount of wholeness. And it was something that was really important for me. I wanted to craft a character that lived in a body that did not belong, clearly did not belong, had been marginalized. In fact, the whole thing began really as a way of encompassing or kind of grappling with the realities of living in a disabled or chronically ill body and becoming overly medicalized and
hmm
objectified that way. That was the original seed, and how it can be a bit of a horror story sometimes, and surreal most of the time, and finding our way. And what really intrigued me about Sona is because when I kind of met her in this, where I met her is where the book starts. That is what came. And this beautiful moment when she's in the forest and experiencing her one of her rites of passage. And she came to me very whole and very secure. And so this question of how do I weave a history for her where she has experienced that rupture with the world because she doesn't belong in it. And she is trying to find her own way. And yet she's had a background where she feels secure and whole in herself. And that is something that we don't see a lot in stories and in literature. Usually the hero or the antagonist or the protagonist, sorry, who has embodying this rupture with the world has a lot of trauma in the background. And I wanted her to come from wholeness. I thought, what a beautiful a way of blossoming into the world, and just I don't know, might have been a bit of wishful thinking for myself and so many of us as well. But I wanted to write that into existence. So thank you so much for the compliments and the affirmation. I really do hope everybody goes to get it. It's Descent. It's a little novella, and it won a fabulous fiction prize with Omnidon Publishing, who is my lovely champion in the publishing world, and they're bringing it out to the world this year. So I really do hope everybody gets a chance to read it. And I'm really looking forward to it because I think we're still running the contest this year, and I get to be the judge if it goes ahead. So we're still in the process of finalizing that, and that's going to be a great honor.
Oh, fun. I love that so much for you.
You.
Yeah, for sure. I will be acquiring my physical copy of the book once it's is published, because even though I've read it in the digital format, I'm very much a person that wants a book in my hands. So,
Yes.
Yeah, that will be something to look forward to for sure. So, in some of the ways that we have talked about your work and just how you're showing up in the world in a previous conversation, I love the way you describe how you have been just hospicing the old passing of things and the coming back into your um, authenticity. And again, I mean, it's evident in the book, but also in your life.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Let's talk a little bit about what the concept of hospicing
Yeah.
is. I think, we're not quite as familiar with it as we could be at this point in our evolution, just because we separated so much with death. I mean, that's a big part of modernity, is
Mm.
separating ourselves from death and living this sense of, you know, um, big and bold right up until the moment we blink out. Stephen Jenkinson is a wonderful teacher of this, and he talked about how we've lost the art of dying because we're not supposed to die anymore. We're supposed to live right up until the moment we're dead. Like there's alive and then there's dead, and we're supposed to be just be living fully right up until that moment. And we don't know what it is to let go of things as deeply as we used to. We don't live as closely with death. And I think hospicing is very misunderstood in our culture now. And I'm not claiming to be an expert on the end of life care of hospicing, but the concept of sitting with and holding space for the endings and the dying and the letting go and the dropping away and the fading of things. It is natural and wild in our human existence that this happens. It happens everywhere in nature. And yet we separate ourselves from it. And the art of sitting with it and holding space for it is how I envision hospicing in all of its forms. And I think that grief practice and honoring, how I break down grief is the honoring of our limitations and endings in life. And so that can happen 1,000 times a day sometimes. And then in big, big ways when we do lose a loved one, or we go through societal trauma, climate change, what happened with the wildfires. At any given time, I could point to any number of those, what's going on with Israel and Palestine and in Gaza, the traumas all over the world. This all requires hospicing and grief work, interpersonally, and then hopefully as groups and as society. So how that works in my own life, I wrote a poem that said I've been sitting with the dying of my dreams, and the effort hasn't killed me. It's something that comes up a lot living with disability and chronic illness. You'll hear it in the community. We talk about disability grief. We are sort of iteratively on as a way of cycling through, called over and over again to grieve our dreams. And I think disabled people are able to offer some teachings and some leadership that way. for the rest of modernity and everybody else who's temporarily able-bodied, as we like to say, and enjoying the fullness of physical expression, and able to feel a little bit more in the flow with your dreams. So to sit with the letting go and the watching them fade away, and know that you're okay, and know that it's not going to kill you, and that there is still life, and there is that space that exists that can then become a place to hold new and different things, and a sense of magic, and becoming very much in tune and akin with the ordinary, and letting that guide us into deeper and deeper levels of authenticity. I hope I just answered your question. I just let that flow, and I'm not sure that's where you wanted to go with it.
No, I mean, I don't know if you did or not either, but it was wonderful what you just shared. I feel like you did within all of that, but so much of what you just said stands out to me and just gets me thinking more about specific things. And one of them is just the temporariness of able-bodied people.
Yes, hello. Mm-hmm.
And, it's easy, I think, for said able-bodied people to take that for granted and not allow themselves the opportunity for that sitting and that still, which I feel like is something that is often missed or dismissed when you are able-bodied and you can just go and you can just do, and then you miss out on the opportunity to really think about the whys and the different layers of just yourself. I just feel like there's so much superficialness in a lot of able-bodied people's lives.
I felt like that was a prayer, Sarah. That was just when you just conjured something there. That was beautiful. And yes, there is the thing about able-bodiedness, the way, again, this comes back to our modern world. I mean, we have to acknowledge, or I'd like to say I would like to encourage us all to acknowledge and honor the fact that for so terribly long in our society, anything other than able-bodiedness was labeled sin, or the wages of sin, or something that came from demons or evil spirits. And that there are examples of that even 100 years ago. This is not old time past energy. This is in us. This is in our culture. And the more we industrialize, the more we then digitize, we get more and more into this sense of longevity, and again, this bigger, bolder, living fully, as if that is what is the only life of any real worth. And it's all part of the hustle. In my opinion, you can look at that, you can trace it all back to a fear of not being full or whole just in ourselves, and the capitalism and the consumerism of our culture to just keep us pushing and distracted and engaged with the hustle and the grind. That's the word I was looking for. So we really, we can go back and forth about the philosophy of looking at illness and disability as a gift. I think it is always good to do that. I think practicing gratitude in life is always good, opening ourselves up that way, but it is problematic. And I think it's also another way of packaging disability in a way that doesn't allow us to really grieve and feel the limitations, and it sometimes causes more suffering. So I'm always a little careful about going to in that direction. But I will say that I do think, as I said before, disability and queerness and anything that's marginalized, it gives us an opportunity to look at life differently and ask ourselves what's really important. And does this mean what we think it means? And am I going to allow the meaning to be projected onto me by a system that is grinding forward and oppressing and killing us in some ways, and certainly causing harm to the planet? Or am I going to come from authenticity? Am I going to come from what is real, what is meaningful? Where is my story being written from? Where do I look to for my source of wisdom and guidance, and what is real and what is important and what is valuable? And when we slow down and we get out of the grind and we learn to ask ourselves what's important. And it's all very radical to do this. I mean, let's not be kidding ourselves. This is difficult and it's radical, and it doesn't happen in one fell swoop unless like me, you hit the wall and you collapse. But even then, the collapse takes so much self-care that you don't necessarily get into the big questions right away. You're just surviving for a little while. So it's a lifetime practice. And it really does require us to learn to ask different questions and to sit in a space that allows that, to create the space that allows that.
Absolutely. And I think it also takes the understanding that you shouldn't be trying to conform yourself into something that doesn't feel right for you. Like if you are, you know, outside of those societal norms or what society tells us is a norm, that's probably a better way of saying it. Trying to cram yourself into that type of accepting reality of most people of the world, right? It's that is just going to cause you to find yourself in a place of resistance of what your own truth and knowing is, in a way that just completely sabotages your gifts that you have to give to the world.
Absolutely. And in case anyone listening doesn't know it yet, resistance causes suffering. Where we push against what is and what is true and what is calling us, that causes suffering. That is suffering, I think, in many ways. And that push and that need to be something, to conform and to be something that society puts on us and to follow that path, it really does. It hurts. It hurts us and everyone around us in all sorts of ways that I think we're going to spend generations unraveling that suffering and that pain. And, just to make sure that we sort of address the able-bodiedness quality again, this, we talked a little bit before we started recording that I've had a busier month than I usually have. I usually live a very restful, rest-based life, but this last month has had some more activity in it. And it's been a beautiful reason. I've been helping and supporting my mother, who's 82, and she's going on her first international trip with my sister to Ireland. And she was nursing a sore shoulder, and we were getting all her stuff together, and she has some anxiety, which she would not mind me saying. So it was a bit of a process. Let's just say that it was a journey, and there was a lot more trips out of the house that I'm used to, and a lot more of tending to different details. And I got tired, and that busy causes tiredness for me, and some real deep fatigue. And just in the last couple of days, I've been resting a lot and coming back into myself. And just this morning, this is so beautiful. Literally just this morning, I was in my meditative prayer space and feeling the magic that is my natural place in life when I'm feeling good and feeling very much in the flow. And I had a stunning realization. For me, it felt stunning in that I realized, oh gosh, when I get busy, when I get even just that much more busy, it's so hard to connect with this feeling. And I had this deep, profound sympathy for all the able-bodied people who are busy in life, because it really does. It fills the space. The busyness and the grind and the hustle and the just trying to ends meet, and pay the bills and get through the to-do lists. It fills the space, and the space then can't hold the magic, and it can't hold those moments of reflection where we feel, I don't know if anyone else will resonate with this, but when I really am in touch with my flow, I can feel the world looking at me. I can feel whether you want to call her Mother Nature or the creative power of life, whether you look at it as a spiritual source or God, whatever word you use for it, I can feel that energy looking at me, and there's a presence there. And the busyness crowds that out. Yeah. And it was such a lovely, lovely gift for me this morning to kind of have that full circle moment for me. And I'm not saying I've never felt this before, but it was just so lovely, so delicious, so sweet to be sitting in that presence and realizing, wow, if I had to choose between feeling this more often than not and doing more, I'd rather feel this. And for someone who's lived with chronic illness and disability, who's craved, just wanting to work and wanting to be out in community, wanting to date and have a social life, like, just all the ways in which my life tends to be naturally restricted by the disability, to have that moment. Oh, it was so sweet. So sweet this morning.
I
I'm so
love
happy to be
that
able
for
to share
you.
it.
Yeah, I love that for you. And I'm so glad that you can like speak that magic out loud because I really feel like people will connect with that and they will understand what you're talking about. I think what we have a harder time wrapping our minds around, especially able-bodied people, um, is, and you've used the word for this before, that midwifering in
Mm-hmm.
that type of new world that you want for yourself that's different from what the world tells us it should look like. Getting to that flow state, like you talked about. I feel like that's more important than any kind of like finding your passion or finding your purpose. It's that being in flow state. But how do we get there?
Oh, well, let me roll out my 3-point plan for you,
Yes, I
Sarah.
want you to tell us exactly step by step what to do. We're listening.
Oh, yeah. Well, listening, that's it. You just said it. It's listening.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
slowing down. I truly believe. I mean, I think there's probably, we don't have enough wisdom surrounding us. It's one of the reasons I'm so glad to be reemerging with the era of podcasts,
Yeah.
and collecting this archive of wisdom, and feeling honored to be in any way included in that. I think listening and slowing down and being willing to question. I have
Mm.
lived by the spiritual principle for a long time that asking the question creates space for the answer. And
It
sometimes
seems
we,
so simple when you say it like that.
yeah, baby, but asking the question creates space for the answer. If we don't know how to ask the questions, we can't find the answer. And
Mhm.
we need to learn how to ask bigger, better, deeper, more curious, more creative, more generative questions. So just asking how, how do we get in touch with that flow state? How do we learn to hold space for letting the old fall away and birthing something new?
Mhm.
That is an incredibly powerful practice. And asking that, gathering with others who can ask those questions, and just riffing on the answers. Okay, well, let's answer it. Let's play for 15, 20 minutes or an hour or a year or 3 years till we start aligning with that and making kin with it, and becoming friendly with more generative questions and the space that it creates. And I think a really important part is letting go and grieving and hospicing the need to have all the answers. This is something that it's sort of baked into modernity. There's a wonderful book called Hospicing Modernity by Vanessa. Oh, I wrote it down earlier. So Vanessa Machado de Oliveira. And it's beautiful. It's a big, heady kind of almost academic work, but it's just gorgeous if anyone's interested in this. And she talks about how baked into the sort of safety mechanisms for modern society is the idea that you can't move on to something else until you have the exact thing that you're moving on into. Like the intolerance for uncertainty, the intolerance for the in-between place. And I really think that I have gained some level of depth in learning how to tolerate the in-between, embracing the uncertainty.
Mhm.
That's sort of my piece in what I encourage people to do, is be okay with not knowing what we're moving into.
Mm.
And that holding the space and asking the question and then being creative with it. And we're not going to find it. We're going to practice. We're going to try. We're going to experiment. We're going to create things for ourselves and pieces of art that make us wonder, and lovely little micro practices within communities. But we're not finding any real answers for the way ahead for probably a generation or two at least. And really getting clear with that is an important part of it. Letting go of I'm here to change the world, and that sense of purpose that is infused with that level of legacy, and realizing our legacy is a lot smaller than that. It's the recipes we pass on to, or that have been passed on to us. It's the friendships we develop with a neighbor, and that time we run out to help them, our 90-year-old neighbor dragging the garbage can to the corner, and we run out to help them. It's those things.
Right. Yeah. And it's like the idea that, I'm going to butcher this quote probably, but it says something along the lines of, we're not all going to do great things, but we all can do small things with great love. Something along those lines.
Well, if you butchered it, it was still beautiful. I love it.
Yeah, it's that idea that, if everybody is just on this mission to like do something epic and huge, and in the era of like needing millions of followers or things like that, if everybody's on this mission to like be biggering and biggering and biggering, you're forgetting about all of the like small ways that you can show up in your everyday that make a huge difference in your life and everybody else's.
There's the bloom where you are planted phrase as well, which I've always loved. Exactly. I love that biggering. That one's gonna sink in. It's gonna come back out later sometime. But absolutely, we can leave a legacy of kindness and really be guided by kindness and small things and holding space. And I know I struggle a lot these days with not just the sense of am I doing enough, but am I owning my privilege enough? Because as much as I have lived a life that has not been, middle class security because of the disability, I've had employment insecurity and financial insecurity. I live on social assistance, meets my basic needs. And I'm very honest about that. I'm very honest about the impact that poverty and social isolation can have. And I'm not the most privileged, but I come from the privilege of whiteness and middle class security. And there's a social currency that I have been enabled with. And I'm always asking myself, if it's just me sitting and scribbling my stories, is that ever going to be enough? Am I doing enough for the people that are hurting more than me? And I don't know. I think we need to hold space for that question too. There's no right answer for that, because that can paralyze us. Really, truly, if we allow ourselves to feel the enormity of what we can't do, it can overwhelm us. So it's important not to get paralyzed either. And so there's that fine line between investing in ourselves and valuing ourselves, feeling the authenticity and the magic of it, and finding that flow state and moving from it and learning to ask these creative, generative questions, and not celebrating ourselves for that sense of what I bring forward will heal the world. Well, it will, but not all at once, and probably not in this generation, and not by yourself. Like getting out and giving to the world is important.
100% agree with that. And what you said earlier, though, about like that enoughness and questioning whether being in a body that is limited in some way or rejected in some way, and still wanting to show up fully.
Yeah, that's a deep grief. That's a deep grief, especially when modernity, when the world and ableism constantly, like everywhere you look, it can tell me that I am not enough, and I'm not giving enough, and my life isn't worthy if I'm not overcoming. I have over the years, this is that in-between space and that uncertainty and that willingness not to know. I've over the years, I've come to really understand, for me, that humanity is defined by our limitations, not by overcoming them. That constant sense of needing to transcend, and that urge to be bigger, to bigger our lives, and to be more all the time, and to conquer, and as I said, overcome. Whereas if we sit in them, and I say, look, this is authentic to me. And I have an experience of coming from the inspirational spiritual community. I spent years studying to be a New Thought minister in a community where this was actually kind of rife. It was, this ableism was sort of everywhere. It's a form of spirituality that's founded in faith healing, really. So, try being an ill person in that environment. It's come a long way, and it's subtle in some ways, but I like to share the story that in these communities, they'll often say everything is God, everything is spirit. And then when you bring forward an illness or something you're hurting with in some way, the response to that is, oh, but that's misalignment with God. It's like, well, I thought everything was God. I thought everything was spirit. And it occurred to me one day that, if I am constantly in a process of trying to heal and transcend and find a place of divine healing and divine vision and prototype is the word that gets thrown around, that isn't sick. If I'm always trying to put myself in that find that place in myself that has never been sick, that doesn't know what illness is, then that really is me looking at creation, at spirit, and saying, I have no use for you in this form, and rejecting it. And because my life before finding this community, my life was very much centered around authenticity, I thought, I can't do that anymore. I need to find a deeper place of authenticity that allows for my limitations and allows for the smallness. And for anyone who follows the Winnie the Pooh, for the piglets of the world, the small, the virtue of the small, as they say in the virtue of the small in Taoism. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I think that we as a society look at that and understand the word smallness in a negative light.
Exactly.
I don't think that there is a negative connotation to that word. If you really think about doing things on a small, authentic, intimate level that you couldn't possibly give in a larger way and still have those same things be true about it.
Yeah, exactly. There is a metaphor within the sort of new age and new thought, spiritual philosophy that talks about why would you go to the ocean with a Dixie cup? Like if the ocean is the entire creative power of the universe, like why would you go with a Dixie cup, or why wouldn't you go with something that like a tanker truck, or why wouldn't you just become the ocean? That's sort of the ultimate. And again, these philosophies, these questions are always good for when there are times when we need to kind of open our thoughts and open our hearts and find some creativity within us. And I do, in fact, I have a meditation that I use myself and I offer it to other people called the Sea of Abundance, which is all about going to that, being wrapped up in the generosity, the givingness of life, and attuning ourselves to that. But what I realized is that, those Dixie cups are useful, if we're in fact scooping up a little piece of the creative power of the universe. If all I have is a teaspoon of that energy on a given day, then that's like the entire creative power of the universe in the teaspoon. And so how can that be a bad thing? How can that be anything other than glorious and wonderful and magical, wonder-filled? That's a wonder-filled teaspoon. And if that's what I've got to work with, then that's what I've got to work with. And it doesn't do me or anybody else any good to go looking for the tanker truck and to try to hold myself accountable to the tanker truck and fill that up every day. If what I can do is the teaspoon, if the teaspoon is what is natural and authentic to me and my limitations and my capabilities, then embrace that and live with that. And it gets right back into embracing and accepting our bodies, and
Mhm.
the bodies of the planet, and where we are in relationship with ourselves and each other and the world.
Arya, what I hear you say when you're talking about that teaspoon serving size is that it isn't like it's diluted just because it's only a teaspoon. It is still the full potency and magic that it is, and there's enough for everybody to have a teaspoon.
More than enough.
Hmm.
Yeah. And you know the teaspoon, I think, yes, absolutely. There's never a limitation in that creativity.
Hmm.
But our physical bodies, the physical side of life, is made from limitation. I mean, limitations are what shape us. And
Hmm.
so, really being human, there's that, what's that phrase that we're not human beings having a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings having a human experience.
Right.
I love that, but also, you know what? We're human beings. We're human beings. This is who we are. Maybe we're more than that. Maybe there's 1,000 other places to go beyond this place. But right now, this is what we're doing.
Hmm.
This is the experience we're having. It might be an illusion, but it's the only one we got. So, let's be here now. And in our physicalness, we are wild, we are natural, we are a part of this world, we are an expression of this planet and an extension of it. And so there's something beautiful in that, to be found in the shaping, in the space that we take up. And that to me is a big part of understanding that, teaspoons, dicks, cup, tanker truck. Some people can do the tanker truck. And I love the people that can do the tanker truck, but I can only do the teaspoon. And so, yeah, there's always more for me to go. I can always fill that teaspoon back up, but maybe only once a day. I don't know. And it's up to all of us, and you know what, maybe I don't have enough to give to you today because I've already emptied my teaspoon. But you know what, come to the ocean, come to the sea, get your own teaspoons. Like, we can work this out. And
Hmm.
there's never a limitation in our creativity, but the limitation of our physicalness is real, and it is important, and it's meaningful. And so embracing it is a huge part of our story here. And I always like to encourage people to do that. But
For
yes, you're
sure.
absolutely right, Sarah, that there is always enough for everybody, as
Yeah.
long as we're honoring the physical side too, and what we can and cannot do.
Well, let's talk about that physical side a little bit and some of the radical ways that you have embraced rest, especially in recent years as you've been navigating something really hard and debilitating of your own, and coming into the realization that um, not only is rest necessary, I think most of us can grasp that, but just that it is how you've put it and how we talked about in the introduction. It's almost a devotional path.
Almost. It is for me. It definitely is for me. Oh, how just, talking about rest, I could go on for days. Let's see. Rest is absolutely, when you say, I think most of us can wrap our minds around the fact that we need it. Of course we need it. We need some. But it is a currency we don't really deal in our culture. It's seriously undervalued, and we don't make enough space for it. Tricia Hersey has written that amazing book called Rest is Resistance. And I think she's absolutely right. It's a political act. To rest is to claim our time and our energy and our body and our power back from a system that reduces us to units of labor and says, no, you got to work more and do more and hustle and grind. So it is all of those things. And, it's always been a big part of my life. I became ill when I was 11, debilitatingly so when I was 11 years old. I'm now, how old am I? 53. So it's been a minute. And, rest and finding quiet spaces and being okay in those quiet spaces was something that I had to learn how to do really early, and to value life it isn't where I'm finding creative ways to try to meet my goals. These were always a part of who I was. And I entered into the spiritual and creative side of life through that portal, through trying to find healing, and, also from some childhood trauma as well. And really wanting to love my body just the way it was, just the way it is. I had a sort of profound moment with a counselor when I was 21. And I realized I was carrying around such hate, such resentment for my body, even though I had tried so hard to love it and be in an accepting place and work with it. But, I was 10 years in and my life was falling apart again, and I couldn't go to school, and I was having to reevaluate everything. And I was not at all equipped to sit with the dying of my dreams at 21. Took close in my early 40s for that to happen. But I really wanted to be in a place of love and acceptance with my body. That was a real deep goal of mine. And so rest has always been there, but it wasn't until 2010 when I hit another collapse time. I'd been touring with a book I'd written called Love Threshold, and touring with spiritual centers and teaching classes, and trying once again to kind of leverage into some sort of business practice, a vocation that would sustain itself, that I could sustain. And it didn't work, because it never did. And it was not going to happen for me that way. And I hit a real collapse, really entered into a stage of just falling apart. And I had to let it go this time. So I realized, the one thing I haven't tried over the years is really, truly just accepting that maybe I can't do this. I can't work. And I gave myself a big beefy time of 10 years. I was like, I need 10 years, because it needs to be something that was so far out that I wouldn't give up on it in 6 months and just say, okay, no, I need to start hustling again. And I, coincidentally or not, it really did take about 10 years before I was ready to start. That's 10 year. The 10-year mark is when I won the award for Descent. So however you want to think about that, I think it's sort of lovely. But I had to start really embracing a practice of letting my limitations lead the way, letting my body lead the way. And rest was the practice that needed to emerge. And I really look at rest now in 3 ways. I look at this micro rest, macro rest, and deep rest or radical rest. And the micro rests are anything that might take 20 seconds to 3 minutes. They're the tiny little breaks. You can kind of come into yourself while you're washing the dishes or moving between appointments, or you can go to the bathroom. I love using the bathroom for spiritual and personal healing. Take a break. Nobody bugs you in there. Anything that's 3 minutes long. And then the macro rests are when you have to carve out a little more space, and it could be 10 minutes, it could be 20, it could be an hour or 2. And you don't necessarily have to be lying down and doing nothing for that time. It could be a walk in nature or something creative, as long as it's not based in excitement or numbing or escaping, that time where you're really kind of just shutting off. You just really, rest is generative, rest is creative. So as long as it's quiet and restorative. And then the deep rest is when you've entered a phase of collapse where you really need to prioritize rest over every other activity. And that is recovery oriented. Mm-hmm. And it might take a few weeks, or it might take a few years. And that was the phase that I was in 2010 and 11. And it took a long time for those dreams to die and the ways of pushing to fall away. It literally took 2 years, took 2 full years before my subconscious stopped racing through the cycle of gotta go, gotta do, gotta plan, gotta try, gotta shift. Like it was, I'm not saying that it was constant until then, but it faded. And it was around about the 2-year mark that I sort of spent a day in a space where I wasn't feeling haunted and plagued and pushed at and pulled at. And that was my nervous system. And so my nervous system has some specific things going on. And I think about that, and I think about what everybody's living in, this soup of pushing and grinding that everyone is living in. And the gift of rest that I gave myself, and I really hope and wish and pray for everyone that we start giving ourselves and each other more and more over time, and creating that space for it, and to really let it nurture us and show us the way. I think rest, the reason I call it a devotional practice is because it takes up space in our lives, and it requires us to make different decisions. It sets different priorities for ourselves, and it does invite us in to what is wild and authentic and natural. It does invite us into more grief and shows us our limitations and the contractions, not just our expansions. It invites us into depth and non-linear ways of thinking and moving and creating in the world. It invites us into cycles and the letting goes. And it's such a sweet, beautiful practice. And it's so possible for us to find our individual path with it, and to sew it in tiny little ways, and just watch how that can create different space. Or, like some of us, myself included, need the larger spaces. And my rest now is, it has to be the foundation of my life. It has to be the place, the soil that I put my roots down into, and it is what nurtures me and guides me. And this is all part of the devotional practice of it. So I hope that makes sense to yourself and to your listeners. Oh, good.
I loved the way you explained all of that. It was, I think, just something everybody needs to hear. We really are afraid of rest, I feel like, in a lot of ways in our culture, because people are given badges of honor for hustling and grinding and the work harder, grind harder, the mentality of all that. And we could go on the whole nother hour about how that's really detrimental to our lives, and our mentality, and just everything about this humaning experience. I think we're coming around more as people, and understanding that that's not you're not here on this earth to just work and sleep and repeat it until you die, right?
Exactly.
I love something that you said within what you just shared about letting your limitations lead the way. I think so many of us here, and we've talked about it many times on this platform, even about breaking down your limiting beliefs and pushing past what is limiting you. But you're talking about letting from your lead. Yeah.
This is so important. Let's actually look at this, because there is a big difference between what I call our limitations, and me using that word, and limiting beliefs. There are limiting beliefs, and we take them on because society projects things onto us. We do not learn how to live authentically, how to live in wholeness, how to navigate that ground and be in that landscape with ourselves or each other. So absolutely, limiting beliefs are a real thing. And I think we mentioned that earlier when we talked about, the sense of going to the creative power of the universe, going to that being in that givingness, and attuning ourselves with that creativity. There's always good reason to ask ourselves, is this true? Can I believe, can we expand this and welcome in new thoughts? And can I let this idea that I'm carrying around of myself or what life is, can I let that go? Can I be curious? Can I bring curiosity to that? That would be the kind of practice that I would consider questioning or letting go of our limiting beliefs. But to come back to our physicalness, we all have limitations. Limitations are a natural part of being here in this world and being human. The natural world is a world that has incredible capacity, but also perfectly natural, innate limitation in it as well. Limitations are that which shape us and give
Yeah.
shape to our lives, including our lifetime, the span that the time that we get to spend here. So when I say letting our limitations lead the way, and I don't mean to completely discount our capabilities, at the very least, I would say let them both have a seat at the table. They're co-pilots.
Mm-hmm.
But I think talking about our limitations is an important piece right now. And we need to make more space for them and their wisdom and their naturalness and their authenticity. And they will make themselves known when we rest, and they will also lead us into rest, right? By pushing against them, our body asks for more rest. And when we're in our rest, we get to see those natural limitations within us, and we begin to become attuned to them and how to honor them and live with them in wholeness and authenticity. And that's where the beauty is, because that's where our truth is.
Right.
I hope that's clear, that difference between the two, because it is an important distinction to make. And I think we confuse the two way too much in our culture.
I would agree with that 100%. And something that comes to mind for me that is usually more academia type based of a message, but it's like that idea of asking a fish to climb a tree. That fish is has the limitation of not being able to climb a tree, right? But that doesn't
Can't even exist
mean
outside of the water. Exactly.
right. But it doesn't mean it doesn't have the capacity and the strength to swim far and deeply and beautifully where it's meant to be.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I mean, look at the strength and the persistence that the salmon exhibit moving upstream to spawn,
Mm-hmm.
but they can't climb a tree,
Mm-hmm.
and why ask a fish to be anything other than a fish? Well, why
Right.
ask a human to be anything other than a human? And part
Mm-hmm.
of our beautiful humanness is our ability to dream and see ourselves as other things and imagine for ourselves. But we're still human, right? So let's do that and be in these beautiful bodies and
Mm-hmm.
honor them and let them lead the way. Let our paths be real and authentic and meaningful, because they're
Mm-hmm.
woven from the fabric of who we are.
Right. And that's one way that our complexity as humans is a lot more or maybe beautiful in a different way than
Mm,
the salmon, let's say, because we all are doing the humaning differently, and that's perfectly okay.
yeah. Yeah, we're story makers. That's a
Hmm.
big part of our humanness, is the ability to tap into stories for ourselves and others in the world. And it has caused a lot of suffering,
Yeah.
and it has also brought a lot of beauty. And I think in a real way, as a society, I think that's a very good description of where we are. What kind of story do we want to tell, and what do we want to be a part of? What sort of story makers, what kind of meaning do we want to be making now? And
Hmm.
and it comes back to holding space for new questions and letting the questions make more space, and learning to be in the in between and let the old go, welcome in
Hmm.
some new, and be okay with the uncertainty, because we're not going to
Right.
know.
And be okay with being afraid of that uncertainty and being
Mm-hmm.
okay with releasing your grip on control of trying to create certainty, because I feel like that's where we really get stuck a lot too, is and that's the reason that we have such a limited capacity to accept what is different or what is not the same as ourselves, is because we fear what we can't understand and we want to control things in a way that makes sense to us and not remember that it doesn't have to make sense to us.
We don't even have to know. I mean, that the phrase "I don't know" is incredibly powerful, incredibly
Hmm.
powerful. I don't know, and it's okay not to know. And rest as a devotional practice is a space that allows us to sit with that.
Hmm.
And I love the fear you're bringing up, Sarah, and thank you for doing it, because we are afraid of rest and we are afraid of uncertainty.
Hmm.
And I think those two things, they're such close cousins. They're such companions,
Yeah, I
because
love the
when
way you
we
said
rest,
that.
our uncertainty comes up.
Yeah.
And when we embrace our uncertainty, I wouldn't be surprised if every person who ever has embraced a moment of uncertainty has been resting while they do it. Like and I don't mean like you need to create the space to get just like to be uncertain is a moment of pause. Therefore, it is a moment of rest, and to practice rest makes us more capable of the uncertainty. Boy, we could just go around in this circle forever.
We could. I could talk about this all day. But I want to respect your time and I want to get to the way that you are helping other people embrace this with your rest gatherings. That is something very a new concept for me, for sure. And I think our listeners are going to be intrigued by what is that? What is a rest gathering?
Well, I think it's something that's going to evolve a little bit by the people who gather. So I'm very excited about that. I'm happy that there's an element of I don't know in the answer to that question. Yeah. Rest gathering is my goal is to be running it every other month. About the second Saturday of every other month. The time might shift a little bit depending on what my capacities are, because I have to honor the limitations too. And I came up with the term rest gathering because it is a gathering of people, but as a group, we are gathering rest around us in a space together. Mm-hmm. And it's a Zoom online gathering of people. It's free. And it's for people who want to practice rest. Again, it's going to be a little shaped by who gathers and the questions we have and whether or not there's an element of rest that people are working on and really want to kind of workshop a little bit and ask some questions about. There's a little bit of meditation, a little bit of intuitive play. I pull a card usually, or we talk about a crystal that might provide a nice energy or to focus on. And there's always some actual rest time in the gathering itself. So whether it's 20 minutes or half an hour of the hour that we're together, it's just quiet time. And everyone online is able to use it however they feel guided. So some people have laid down and rested. Some people did some yoga. I often will do some ongoing intuitive play. Like I'll play with the tarot cards or do some meditation because my lying down quiet rest time is seated throughout the day. So when I'm on the rest gathering, it's just that much more active for me. I will engage in some kind of creative activity. And I enjoy having that space set aside for that. So it's just a generative, creative, restful time. And we do it together and we hold that space. I'm really hoping it kind of becomes an anchor in the lives of people, a touchstone that, maybe people don't make it for every meeting, but when they do, they get a chance to really carve out some space and share it and know that we're not alone in doing it. Right. Giving that gift to each other of support and recognition and honor. So it's something go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, it sounds absolutely extraordinary and something that sounds delightful to be a part of.
Well, I really hope it is that for people. And as I say, it's going to grow, I think, over time. It's a pretty new project for me. And I would invite everybody to check it out. You can if you sign up for the newsletter, I will let everybody know when the next one's coming and you can sign up for it. And there's almost always going to be a space on my website for it as well. You can click around to events, probably it'll be on that page.
Well, always to stay connected and find those links will be in the show notes for sure. But Arria, before we close today, sadly, because I feel like I could talk to you for a lot longer about all of this, what would you like to leave our listeners thinking about today as we close?
Wow, what a beautiful question. I would love, let's get back to the questions. What kind of question do you want to ask yourself today? And what kind of space can that create for yourself? I mean, we've asked a lot of questions in the last little bit. So, whether it's how can I let go of the old and welcome in the new, or how can I invite rest into my life and welcome it more deeply? How can I journey in authenticity? What would it mean for me to be in a healthier relationship with my limitations? How is my body asking for honor and acceptance today? Or maybe it's a question of their own, but, really sit with the power of a curious and creative question and let that create some space. That's what I'd really encourage everybody to sit with, because if you ask the question, the space will come. The space for the answer will be created around it. And it might take a couple minutes, it might take a few hours, it might take a few days or weeks. So practice the question.
I love that so much. This has just been a beautiful conversation. Thank you for sharing and allowing us to see your insights and see your beauty in the way that you pour it out. It's just been wonderful today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I've so enjoyed this.
There were many concepts and thoughts in this conversation that left me thinking more about things way after Arria and I ended our recording. One of them that stuck with me most is the concept of hospicing modernity. There's a pressure all around us all the time that you have to keep up with keeping up, to modernize every part of our lives in a way that really only benefits hustle culture, consumerism, and capitalism, and leaves many of us anxious, exhausted, and unhappy with trying to chase a way of living that we aren't even sure we actually want. I'd love to hear what resonated most for you from this conversation. Leave a comment or use the email in the show notes to share your thoughts. This conversation leaves us with a lot to question, a lot to reflect on. If you'd like to stay connected to Arria or acquire her beautiful book, please do use the links in the show notes to reach out and continue to be inspired by the beauty and perspective she's sharing with the world. If you love these conversations, as always, please share the episodes. The best and most important thing to help keep this platform sustainable is to subscribe or follow the podcast. Of all the clicks you make today, please include that one. Until next time, friends.